Every one of us has something that we're passionate about, something that we believe in deeply, and early in life, we're willing to sacrifice and push for those things that we consider valuable. But as time goes on, different challenges come up, and people seem to compromise or give up on their dreams. They sell out, they betray their younger self, and just go for the comfortable route. And that's something we all struggle with, particularly when we think about the idea of career. We all need to support ourselves and make money, but sometimes we feel this conflict between the career we've chosen for ourselves and the truth that we believed in, the things that we were passionate about, the spiritual truths that we were willing to chase at any cost. Today's episode and today's guest takes that issue and confronts it head on. We had the good fortune to sit down with my friend Alex Oppenheimer, who comes from the world of tech and finance, and he's had a front row seat to the ups and downs in the industry and some of the most dramatic moments in tech history. And he sat down with us and we discussed a story that really shared a perspective on what it means to balance your identity and your passion and the things that you truly deeply believe in with having a successful career and being able to provide for your family and contribute to society and to your community and to the world around you. So we hope you enjoy the episode. As always, we're sponsored by Marlowe Plastics, My Glasses Guy, and Rosetta Studio. Alex, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for joining Dreamers Like Joseph. So our brand as a podcast is like that we're cutting edge, that we're groundbreaking, that we're radical, and it's pretty obvious because we started a new podcast in 2026. So like we're disruptors in the field. And I'm sure you're from the industry. I'm sure you've heard the buzz about what we've been doing. So I just want to roll into that with you before we even get to the interview. I know you're a VC guy. You've got money. You want to put it into radical new ideas. So could we just do like a quick Shark Tank thing? I'll throw a couple of, of my radical ideas at you, and you'll just tell me a quick, pass, or if you're interested. Obviously, no pressure. But like I said, these are blue chip, groundbreaking ideas.
Do you want me to dive into them also, or just yay or nay?
Yeah. You could do yay or nay or dive into them, whatever you feel is right. My first idea is something that I've been thinking about a long time. I think it could really change things. Now, I want you to open your mind. Imagine a website where people can upload videos and other users could watch the videos that the other people upload.
It'll never work. It'll never work. It'll never work. The costs are way too high. People won't know how to find the videos. It'll never work. The only chance that it has is if one of these huge conglomerate tech companies buys it and then can put their infinite money machine behind hosting all of this stuff. Otherwise, it'll never work. It'll definitely never become like a social media platform. That for sure won't happen.
Now, you're saying this even if people upload videos of like Turkish guys deep in the wilderness cooking steaks on fires? You don't think that could break through to the zeitgeist?
That will never catch on. I think that potentially like classes could go really well. Like if they're doing like long form courses that people have to sign on for like an hour and a half and watch it at 1x. That will probably go. I think it could go viral actually.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go back and talk to some of the people in my development team about that. Okay, let me throw another idea at you. You know how it's so important to get like blood tests for anything medical? So imagine if there was like a machine, like it would be a kind of a black box that nobody really understands the tech that's inside it, but you take one tiny drop of blood and you can test for everything, right? You don't need to draw more than that, right? It's going to revolutionize medicine. That's what the people who developed the box told me. So would you invest in something like that?
I'm all in, life savings.
And you don't want to ask any questions about the tech behind it.
I just assume it works. Like it should work.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, so I got one win in my bag. I'm not gonna push it further than that. That's amazing. Okay, this, like I say always on these episodes, like we're 2 minutes in and we've already had an amazing success. Okay, Alex, it's really good to have you on the show. We know each other. We attended the same yeshiva in Israel. We briefly crossed paths, and then we lived in the same neighborhood. And since then, we've gotten to spend more time and get to know each other. I wanted to have you on the show because I think you have a fascinating perspective on a lot of different things. And I'm trying to bring out the idea in this podcast that the stories of the Torah, the stories that Jews have been telling for centuries, really can guide us and influence us in a lot of different areas of life. And somebody like you who's deep in the world of tech and finance, the fact that these stories are part of your life as well, I think is something that could really be a educational for our viewers onto the value of these stories. Do you mind just giving a quick summary of your background and some of your work experiences?
For sure. So, originally grew up in the Bay Area, California. Grew up in and around tech, not in a particularly Jewish area. I always say that the whole Bay Area is actually godless country. A friend of mine, while we were in college, went and met with like every religious leader he could find from every religion, and they all struggled. Like every religion struggles in the Bay Area. And my philosophy on why that's the case is there's two main factors. The first is that the founder, the startup founder, is considered such like a chashiv thing, and they really get like deified. At the same time, people also all believe that they could be that. So there's this weird like, this is what I glorify and look up to, but also I could do that. Like when in the right time, like I'll do that. So that's one. People have no fear. They have no awe. They're just like, oh, it's that. And then the second reason is that like the weather is good just most of the time. I studied mechanical engineering at Stanford. I worked at Morgan Stanley in technology investment banking. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. I joined a big venture capital fund called NEA. Worked there for 3 years. Amazing experience. Great people. I actually took 6 months off while I was at NEA and came to Yeshiva in Israel. And then I made Aliyah in August of 2016, worked for a year at a corporate VC based here in Israel, and then left, went out on my own, was doing consulting, advising, working closely with, really portfolio companies of mine and other people's portfolio companies on finance and operations. And then in 2020, I decided to start my own venture fund. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. It's called Verissimo Ventures, and we do early stage investing. I always say we invest it's strictly limited to whatever I feel like is interesting. So people,
that's a good guiding principle.
yeah, I go very much on, I'm a vibes investor. And if I'm doing early stage, I think that's the only way to do it. So
it's very interesting what you said about the Bay Area, because I had the experience of being out there for a couple of weeks a few years ago. And there's like a seductive glamour to being around. You just drive Palo Alto, you drive through these places. It's like, here's Apple, here's Twitter, here's Facebook. And these companies are so influential. And the people you're meeting at Stanford or wherever, like when you're in that area, there's this vibe of these are the people who are pulling the strings, of the world today. So having been there, even as a religious Jew, and like having felt that, there's like this proximity to so much seeming power. So like, I kind of understand what you're saying, why it seems that seems to be the dominant religion, so to speak, in the Bay Area, more so than any of the classic ones.
absolutely.
And when you come from like the belly of the beast, like, you grew up in that part of the world and you've had these experiences being part of the Facebook IPO and working with different companies and like really having been inside that world, is that something that you kind of have to, fight against, or are you vaccinated against it because you're in it, so you know what's going on, behind the scenes?
There's multiple layers behind everything. You can look at things from a lot of different dimensions. I've spent a good amount of time over the last 15 years kind of like reevaluating and seeing experiences again through a different lens. And what keeps coming to mind just in this conversation is we talk about the difference between a Jewish gadol and a non-Jewish gadol, right? A big person. What is someone we look up to in the Jewish world versus like in the secular context? And the examples I love to give are like the big managing director who works at, big investment bank. I'm not going to name any names. And you're like, wow. And they like move so fast and they talk so fast and they do all these big deals and they drive a fancy car and their travel schedule is insane. And like their assistant is a beast. And you're like, oh my gosh. And like they come into these meetings and they have these like chaps and like these ideas. And you're like, wow. And then you like start spending more time with them and you get to know them a little better, just professionally, when it's not like on at level 10, or you start to learn a little bit more about their personal lives and you're like, oh, he's just a guy. he happens to have these like certain strengths and stuff, but like he's just a guy. Like he has the same issues as everyone else. It's very like, oh, like he's totally not worked out on this and he totally struggles with that also, and there's huge gaps here, and that talking really fast thing, it confuses some people, but if you just slow it down a little bit, like you don't get swept away in it and you just realize like, oh, it's just a regular guy. Contrast that to a Jewish gadol. Like I still remember the first time I met Rabbi Gershenfeld 15 plus years ago. And he just seemed so normal and relatable. And I remember like my rabbi who on campus was like, oh, this Rabbi Gershenfeld is like big deal. And I was like, okay, he seems like very normal. And then like fast forward 15 years later, and I'm just in awe of this person. Like the more time I've spent with them, the more I can appreciate the nuance and the depth. And the more you see in all these different situations, the more you realize that like there is so much there. And so if you just spend time contemplating these things and getting to know them and peeling back the layers, most things in life usually reveal themselves in a way similar to this.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. I think that's going to connect to the story that we're going to discuss, kind of like the nature of of greatness in Judaism, and you know how we could bring that into a career as well. So I listen to your podcast pretty frequently, and I don't really understand a lot of
Oh, so you're the one. You're the one.
Yeah. No, you've got people who listen. And you know, I'm learning a lot because again, I just consider myself to be completely illiterate in a lot of the areas that you're expert in. But like to me, in my mind, and again, maybe this is just totally based on stereotypes, it seems like the finance world and the tech world, they don't really go together, meaning like the stereotypes of the finance guy is totally different than the stereotypes of the tech guy. So like where do you see yourself in that nexus, you know?
Well, there's so many things that come to mind there. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'll just call it out. Like the tech world has caused a lot of people to like suspend belief on all things that are fundamental finance. I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was a senior partner at a very big, well-respected growth fund. And he was talking about investing in AI companies. And he literally said that the question was about negative gross margins, which means like the variable costs are greater than the revenue. And the guy was like, well, yeah, but we've figured out that actually just means that people are using the product. So that's not a bad thing. Like, what? Like that like breaks so many rules. Like that's insanity that he's had to cook up this thing that like justifies negative gross margins. Negative gross margins are like the equivalent of like an usur deraisa. You know, it's like if it's selling a dollar.
The biggest red flag imaginable.
Yeah, it's selling $1 for 75 cents. It's like, yeah, duh. Of course you can sell a lot of that. Like right. Imagine it's like setting up a lemonade stand, and instead of selling lemonade, you're just giving away dollar bills. Of course, there's going to be a line down the block, you know? Right. So I was like, wow, the concoctions and the manipulations that people will do to like convince themselves of these things. There is this like arc of finance and tech bros and how they all kind of overlap. The number of people that I know who've gone from, you know, being in banking or private equity or venture to now being CFOs and operators or starting their own companies, it's pretty high. But I also like another thing just came up. There's a certain fund that's like I would say it's like an early to mid stage fund, very well known. I think they manage well over $1 billion, and they have a whole operating team, like a whole team of people that they help their portfolios. Great. Long story short, a friend of mine is like, hey, do you know someone who can help with this modeling exercise for this specific company? And I'm like, yeah, here's my 2 friends who do this. It's what I used to do. And then he's like asking, I'm like, can you just introduce the founder who's asking for this help to the guys, and like they'll just figure out if it makes sense. He's like, oh no, this is an operating partner at this fund that has a whole operating team. I'm like, they have a whole operating team and they don't have someone who can build financial models? They manage well over $1 billion. Like, it's just unbelievable.
What's that team doing?
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. Like, I'm not going to get into hilarious ideas of what their titles and credentials may be, but you do have to suspend belief in. But I actually, that's what people think, that you have to suspend belief. I don't think you do. I think you just have to be creative. I spent a lot of time getting deep with companies on their metrics, on their models, and figuring out the trajectory and understanding the calculus behind it and the non-linearity, right? When you look at like public companies people talk about a company's growth rate as if it's some intrinsic characteristic of a company. It's not. It's the output of whatever else they're doing. It's like the last thing. But if you unpack like what type of business it is and what's actually driving these things, and you take all the derivatives, whether they're mathematical or a more qualitative, like analytical approach to what's driving what's the cause and effect, you can actually start to unpack a lot of what drives these things from a real data and mathematical kind of engineering approach. And that's really what I've tried to do, is say like, I can analyze like any business model But to me, that's table stakes, like diagnosing a company. The question is, can you diagnose a company that has no metrics yet? Can you figure out what those metrics will look like based on the qualitative things that are going on really in the story of the founder and the market and the business that they're building? And so I was like, hey, why don't I just do the hardest thing possible and try to analyze a company with both hands tied behind my back, blindfolded, instead of just like getting in a spreadsheet and analyzing? Like, let's just create it from scratch. Like, we know what good looks like, and when we unpack how to get there. So that's really my ethos, but it's pretty unique. Most people are either like, oh, it's growing super fast, like who cares, it'll work itself out. And like, you know what, sometimes it does. What do I know?
I think in the popular understanding, which is as much as I can manage, there's these, all the stories of the tech companies are always, like these crazy dramas with fascinating, like it always like starts out in the garage and then there's ups and downs and then they surprise everybody and disrupt their industry. And like, so it's very narrative driven, story driven, which I think is why tech kind of captures the mind of the public. But I guess also I could see how
that's also tech journalism, right?
Right, and
that's
there's this
sensationalist
mythologizing
journalism.
Right, like the glamorizing of these crazy stories where there's underdogs and
Funny enough, no VCs actually want that.
Right.
Like in this day and age, in this market, it's like Brett Taylor starts a new company. You know who Brett Taylor is? Like this guy is the chairman of the board of OpenAI. Let me just pull up his LinkedIn page and just tell you what his credentials are. This is what everyone wants to invest in. And like anything less than this, it's like, nah. Okay, so he was a group product manager at Google. Then he was an EIR at Benchmark. Then he was the CEO of FriendFeed, which was acquired by Facebook. He became the CTO of Facebook. Then he started a company called Quip, which never really did anything, honestly, and then got acquired by Salesforce for almost $1 billion. Board member at Axon, which is Taser. Then he was board member at Twitter. Then once his company got acquired by Salesforce, he ended up becoming the co-CEO of Salesforce. And then he started this company called Sierra, and he's the chairman of the board of OpenAI. So like that's what people want. They want that. They're like, we'll just invest in that. We don't want an underdog story. We want a front runner story. Right. Because we want a $50 billion thing.
Right. If 1975 Steve Jobs walks into your office, shaggy hair, barefoot, stinking of BO, and like starts, rattling off his spiel, that's not going to fly anymore today.
Everyone talks like it will, and that's the stories that get glorified. Right. But like, if you look at where people are actually investing, it's like ridiculously charismatic, polished founders with insane resumes. That's where all the attention is going towards. And that's where all the money's going towards. And a lot of it is storytelling. That's become like a job title in startups, is like storyteller. There's an interesting piece I read about that like that's always been a job title for like thousands of years. Right. So
that's what this podcast is about, kind of. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna throw a story at you. I picked this story. I think it'll be interesting for you because to sum it up, it's really about career trajectory and different choices that people make, and working in what you love, sticking with your passion, compromising. I think these are pretty universal themes that come through in the story, but it does have the unique flavor of a Talmudic story. So there's going to be parts of it that are cryptic, mysterious, shocking. There was two great Jewish sages, Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan. And these guys studied Torah together. They were in a yeshiva, they were in a place of higher Jewish study, and they were just studying and trying to just pursue the truth and wisdom of Judaism. But the problem is that they just ran out of money. So they basically said, listen, we're broke. Like we've been pursuing our dreams here of Torah study and spiritual growth, but we're broke and we got to go make some money. And they even quoted this verse in the Torah where it says that, there shouldn't be any needy people among the Jewish people. So they decided to leave the yeshiva and go work. And they were sitting under this dilapidated wall and eating some bread. And all of a sudden they heard these two Rabbi Yochanan heard these two angels talking behind the wall. And the angel said, let's knock this wall down on these two guys because they've given up on their dreams. They've given up on the Torah and spirituality, and now they're going to throw themselves into the world of commerce and materialism. Let's end these guys. Let's just kill them. Let's knock the wall on them. So that's what one angel said. And the other angel said, no, don't do anything to them. Let these two guys go because one of them, his time of achievement is still ahead of him. So Rabbi Yochanan heard this conversation between the angels, but his friend Ilfa didn't hear anything. So Rabbi Yochanan asked him, did you just hear anything? Did you hear any conversation? And Ilfa said, nope, I didn't hear anything. So Rabbi Yochanan said to himself, I overheard this angelic message. It must be that I'm the one who has the destiny of fulfillment ahead of me, and I should actually go back and continue my spiritual pursuit. So Rabbi Yochanan said, you know what? You can go into commerce.
I'm going to go back to the yeshiva. And that's what happened. Ilfa became this merchant, this shipping merchant. He started with boats, and he became very successful. And he went on a lot of sea journeys and made his fortune. And in the meantime, Rabbi Yochanan actually became the head of the yeshiva. He rose through the ranks of the yeshiva, and he was selected to head the yeshiva, and that actually was his job. Like, so they both ultimately got money, one through staying in the yeshiva, and one through going on these ocean voyages, shipping, etc. So when Ilfa finally returned from all his ocean voyages, the people said to him, like, hey, if you had sat and stayed in yeshiva, you could have also been the Rosh Yeshiva. Like, you and Rabbi Yochanan were peers. Had you stuck around, you might have been in this position. So Ilfa, the one who went to become a shipping merchant, he responded by going to his main boat, the main boat of his fleet, and he suspended himself from the mast of the ship. And he said, if there's anyone who can question me on any matter from the Torah, quiz me on any area of Jewish law, Jewish philosophy, any of the things that we studied in yeshiva, if you ask me a question and I can't give you the correct answer, I'm going to jump off the mast of the ship into the ocean. And then the story concludes that an old man came up to him and asked him this really complex question, and he answered the question flawlessly. That's the end of the story. So first of all, have you ever heard the story before?
Yeah, a while ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember when you initially heard it? Did you have any reaction to it? Did you like take any lesson from it, or?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's just very familiar. Which Gemara is it in?
This is, I think it appears in two places, but it's in Masechet Ta'anit 21a.
Okay.
So that's the volume of the Talmud that deals with really the laws of fasts, but somehow this story comes up. For those who aren't familiar with the Talmud, like I said in a previous episode, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Googling it anymore at this point. Try to find someone who actually knows about it, like a real human being. But basically, there's different volumes that deal with different topics, but it's very discursive. Like throughout the flow of a passage of Talmud, it can really go from one topic to the next, and sometimes these stories come up. So that's where this story appears.
Got it. So I have learned Tinus, so that's why it sounds familiar. I learned it very Bekius, but I did learn it
Right.
very quickly. Yeah, the term that comes to mind is tafkid, right? We each have our own tafkid. I think if you look at a lot of the heroes of the Jewish world right now, like you see this being the case. I was just at a random kind of like Siyum event a couple of months ago, and Michael Safdie came. He's the Daily Bitachon guy. He has like 40,000 people subscribed to his Daily Bitachon board. This is a guy who never went to yeshiva, who like became frum as an adult, even though he kind of was involved when he was younger, who is actually one of the biggest vintage Patek Philippe dealers in the world, and all the money he makes and everything he does supports all of his children, who are all like in Kollel and everything, and they just learn. And that he's very clear when he spoke at this event, like that's my tafkid. And I think that each person has their own personality type and what works for them. Rabbi Lopiansky from Yeshiva of Greater Washington wrote a book called Ben Torah for Life.
Phenomenal book. Phenomenal.
It's incredible. And I think every Baal Tshuva goes through this process of being like, well, I want to be a rabbi. And like, I just want to teach and I want to give over. Like I gained so much from this and I just want to give over, which is for sure coming from a good place. But it also reminds me of a story of a mentor of mine who is in his 70s, and he came to yeshiva as a Baal Tshuva 35 plus years ago. And he was connected to a lot of big rabbis back then. And one of his rabbis told him he said, I want to be a great Jew. I want to be the greatest Jew I can be. And he said, one of his rabbis says, yeah, you got to stay in yeshiva, learn, be a rabbi, teach. And another one of his rabbis was like, no, you need to go back to New York. You have a very unique pedigree and background and skill set and personality, and you need to go be very successful and give over through that. And there was a lot of back and forth. They went to some of the Gedolei Israel to ask the question and get the Eitzah. And he ended up going back to New York and working in finance. And he ended up starting an organization that has tens of thousands of students learning. Now, we don't know how good of a rabbi he would have been. And I think that it's almost parallel to the story. Like, we don't know how good of a rabbi he would have been, but it's hard to do better than employing hundreds of young rabbis and teaching tens of thousands of students and being the spearhead that really made that happen. So I think it's really hard to know. I think this is why we need rabbis, right? It's interesting. In the story in the Gemara, you have like this heavenly voice that like one person heard it, the other person didn't hear it. One person went with like derech eretz, like let's just go with the way of the world. Like, okay, this is what I'm this is what I'm hearing and seeing, and I have to use my das and figure out what the right course of action is. That's logical. And I think in the case of Rav Yochanan, who anyone who's learned Gemara has heard of, right? Not a lot of people have heard of Ilfa, and that's fine. But like in a lot of ways, he also went with his own derech eretz, right? And if someone gives you a piece of advice that comes from a place of truth and care and everything, again, he got basically like a baskol, like malachim chatting that he heard, like ruach kodesh,
something undeniable,
Yeah, it's like it's I don't know. I'm trying to think of if you want to do this in English, but like it's mefarish, right? Like it's like
it's explicit.
Like this happened, I need to do this.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people are more influenced and closed-minded than they think they are, unfortunately. So something will happen and they'll be like, I have to do this. And I'll be like, wait a second, like why do you say that? They're like, oh, it's obvious you have to do this. I'm like, well, why couldn't you just do that? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. So most people aren't as open-minded. It takes a big person who's learned a lot and connected to big things to be able to really have that clarity, which is why now in our generation, like we need these advisors and these big people to be around to help guide us and make sure that our where we lack in our midos and clarity and everything is kind of getting covered. But they both did the right thing
based on the knowledge they had and the message that they received.
Yeah, and the circumstances that they had. And so it's usually like pretty obvious. And I've had those moments myself too, where I'm like, man, I just want to like teach and be a rabbi. I was in New York a few weeks ago with a friend of mine who I think he started in yeshiva right as I finished. So like his first year in yeshiva was my third year in yeshiva. And he's now like rabbi in New York, a Kiruv rabbi. And I watched him give a class and I was like, this is incredible. Like I'm like jealous. Right. Then I realized that like, I don't want to like reveal who it is necessarily, but like what he was doing before is not at all conducive to a frum lifestyle. And so he was a little bit lost and like had to figure out what to do. He happens to have like a ton of charisma and be very diligent, and this is perfect for him. For me, like I can do what I need to do with like my, newfound lifestyle, and I don't need to do what he does. And I've said this over and over again, where like I would say, I love not being a rabbi.
Right.
Like I'm just a guy. And I think that it's really important in people's growth journey to just also be able to talk to a guy. Right. Yeah, I remember the first 20 frum people that I met were all rabbis. Like I remember the first Shabbat meals I went to were at rabbis' houses, and being like, there's no way that like normal people do this every week. Like this is the rabbi's job, right? To like host this Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't even know lunch was a thing, right? Like, and then
by the way, this is a big shout out to anybody who hasn't done Shabbat. This is the sales pitch right here. Okay, like we have 2 meals on Shabbat, so go for it.
3,
get a package
4.
Deal. 3. That's true.
Count Kiddush, like
plus Saturday night. We could be talking 5 or 6.
Yeah, you go 5, 6. Like, yeah, I think. Again, I always say I love not being a rabbi. Like I have these. Like if you ask me like what my gift is, it's basically being able to like tell stories with numbers, like adding analytical rigor to a narrative that was very qualitative and making it actually fit in and flow properly. That's probably what I'm the best at. Right. Like it's basically building frameworks on top of, and I'm pretty good with like analogies and relating these sort of things, but like, okay, that's what I'm really good at. And that's very conducive to like a career in finance, tech, whatever. And then I'm also able to, again, be the not rabbi. And I think that affords me 2 things in in my version of like what it means to be a great Jew, which is I can teach people by example. Like most people who go to yeshiva will not be rabbis. This is like Rabbi Lopiansky's point. Like there was an age where like, that's what we needed. I'm not going to get into like the politics of this, but like that age is behind us. Right. There are more people learning yeshiva now than ever in Jewish history. And we need a lot of other roles to be filled to have a sustainable society. Again, this might be a harif opinion. No, but
I think that is brought out in the story. I think that the idea is that, yes, they were in yeshiva together. And that, like, I would view that through a universal lens as like the time when people are like pursuing what they think is meaningful and important in life. The analogy would be people who are sacrificing for art or, for a political cause that they believe in, and you're willing to, throw it all away for the thing that you believe is right. Like, that's the value that they were living with when they were in yeshiva. But I think what the takeaway from the story is that that value continues to be alive, even as they take totally different courses in life. Like, one guy becomes a rabbi and he's a teacher and he's influencing students, but like the thing that's pumping the blood into his life's mission is the values that he learned and he absorbed in that time of his life. And the same thing with Ilfa. Like, when he's putting himself on the boat and saying, like, listen, I'm still living with the Torah.
Yeah.
I still understand the Torah. I still know the Torah. Like, that's another way of saying, you guys don't need to tell me that I made a mistake because I turned my back on what I believed in because I went into, I became a shipping guy. It's no, like, I became a shipping guy who lives by these values, who embodies these values, and I'm still living with the Torah. And, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, the idea that, this idea of like, oh, you're a sellout or you're a pretender, you betrayed what you used to believe in, that's a very black and white picture, and that's not really what the Torah wants from us. I think the whole idea of the Torah is these values that can guide you and can be expressed whatever your career is or whatever situation you're in. Like, the Torah is dynamic and powerful enough to be expressed in any type of situation.
Exactly. I think that's the main idea is like you need this foundation, and then it does need to be the foundation. For a long time, I didn't want to go to yeshiva. Like, I wanted to like live a frum lifestyle and I enjoyed learning Torah, but I didn't want to go to yeshiva. I was too worried about like stepping away. And the truth is that you sometimes in life like need resets, you need structure, you need infrastructure to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. And it's hard to understand that coming at it from the outside, but now from the inside, it's so obvious that if you're not in that like incubator setting where it's just everything all the time, and you can build a healthy foundation from which everything you do sources back to that foundation, then whatever it is that you do can be amazing. I mean, I'm also thinking of like in our shul, they make a Misha Berach during Torah reading, and they say they do it for soldiers, for people learning Torah, and for supporters of Torah. And like that's who it's for. And like I think that represents like the swath of different ways that you can serve your mission as a Jew. And for each, they're each doing hopefully what's right for them. Now, some people end up doing what might be right for another guy, and that's a tragedy. And hopefully they can figure it out. But you also have to understand that first Jew, first Eved Hashem, right? First striving for Dveikus and Yerushalayim. Then investment banker, lawyer, rabbi, soldier, like whatever it may be, that can grow on top of that. And unfortunately, when you meet people and you see them age who don't have this strong foundation, as they get older, it just gets shakier and shakier. They build on top of something weak and they become very fickle. And this is why there's a stereotype of like old people being miserable. It's like they did all this stuff because they thought they were supposed to, but even if they thought about it, it's actually, I think, the people who did think about it, but they didn't have any guidance of how to think about it or what it should source back to. It was very in the moment thinking. I think those are the most miserable people. Like if you look at baby boomers and like their parents, it's like, they're like, wait, why did I do all this? And it's also funny. Like, it's just, there's a big difference between living in Israel and living in Chutz La'aretz. And like, I've been like biking and running a lot. And
yeah, I was going to say at the beginning of this episode, it's a rare opportunity to catch you not on a bike or on a plane. So like, I'm really grateful that we got to actually talk.
Yeah, but it's so easy to get caught up in like the things that we think we should be doing. Whether that's, I got to work, I got to go be a lawyer, I got to go to law school because it's the safe bet. I wrote about this recently.
Yeah.
Or, which I basically said, if you look at my Substack, shameless plug, alexoppenheimer.substack.com. I wrote a piece about how whatever was safe for the last generation is useless for the current generation. But
what do you mean by that? Like, give an example.
Like in our parents' generation, it was like, just go to law school, get a law degree. You can do other things, but like you could always just like go be a lawyer and you get a well-paying job. Yeah. For a 22-year-old kid to be doing that right now, I think is a tragedy, right? And they're doing it to quell the fears of their parents. And I always say that when you deal with your parents from a different generation, you have to go all Charlie Brown on them, right? Like in Peanuts, right? What do the adults sound like in Peanuts? Right? Like, yeah. And I say like, so take whatever words they're actually saying, translate them to Charlie Brown adult speak, and then translate them back to what they really are, what they really mean, which is like, I love you, I care about you, I love you, I care about you. They just don't know the right way to give you advice. And the way that they work is just so different. I'll tell you something else that's, again, this is like totally out of left field. We can cut this out if you want.
Yeah.
But something I realized, I was with certain friends of mine, like I ended up with some friends' parents, right? I don't know if you've ever been alone with your friends' parents over an extended period of time. I mean, you've spent some time with my parents, but you just see that like the baby boomer parents are all miserable, except for like the really holy people. Like they basically just all bicker all the time. Like people in their 60s, they've been married for like 40 years. Like they just bicker all the time. That's just their MO. That's how they operate. And it works for them, right? This is not like a criticism. Like that's just how they learn to live. It was like a generation. I guess the previous generation was really a generation of Gevura, but like they also got that, and they just dealt with stuff. It's like in our generation, like the millennial generation, like, and then beyond, like nobody has the strength or tolerance to like deal with that. Like people expect to be happier, and frankly, they have the tools and the environment to do that. And so it behooves them to work on it. So there's good things to take from previous generations, and then there's things that are a huge mistake to take from previous generations. So the gist and the verve of what they do and how they do it, and you can take the good out of it, but like to do verbatim what someone in a previous generation did is just not relevant.
I mean, I think that's a continuation of one of the other themes in the story, where the people who question Ilfa's decision, like they have this kind of copy-paste mentality. They're like, you and Rav Yochanan are the same, and you should have done the same thing, and like that. I think that's always very risky. The copy paste mentality of like, this is how we did it, so this is how we have to do it. Like, it's not necessarily a path to success. Every person is different. I mean, I think you could be inspired by other people, like you're saying, between generations. You have to it can't be copy paste. You have to maybe isolate, or translate,
abstract,
like you said it. Yeah, like isolate something and say, okay, and how could that play out in my life? But like the idea of, imitating or doing something exactly the same, I agree. It's like it's a recipe for disaster. And that's another huge takeaway from the story, that, you were talking before that people have these questions in their career. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. And it's based on something that they saw somebody else do. And like, who says?
We all also, like, we know people who've gone off the derech, right?
Yeah. Right.
And they, for some reason, usually the reason that happens, again, there's usually some weird stories and whatever. Right. No, I have no judgments on this, but what you often hear on the back end of that is, well, I wanted to be a X, right? And it's usually some professional thing. So, well, I wanted to be a merchant. That would be the case in Ilfa. And so all these people are assuming that like, oh, this guy's a merchant, so he'd just rather be a merchant than a Jew. And he's going, no. I'm a Jew who's a merchant. I don't need to say, oh, now I'm a merchant, so therefore I can't be osek in Torah and mitzvahs and like knowledgeable and growing and learning. Like that's the mistake. The mistake is to think that if I want to do this, I can't do that. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but also going back to like living in Israel and what I was going to say with my like biking and stuff, people are like, where do you get all this time? And I'm like,
yeah, I think that sometimes.
But like these people live in New York, and like, yes, I have to be very lucky that like I've realized over the last year that like my job as a venture capitalist, which I get paid to do, does not, like, being busier is not better. It doesn't result in better decisions. I work in a job that I could take one meeting a year, I can make one investment a year, and it could be Uber. And then I could just be like, I'm done, right? I could, not even per year, like in a career. Like, exactly. I could do that. Now, again, that requires a tremendous level of bitachon, and I would argue that for the vast majority of people, that's just called not doing your hishtadlis.
Right. But you're not putting the effort in, the natural effort that would be required.
Yeah. Driving yourself crazy, like doing meeting after meeting and running around and all this stuff, like it doesn't make sense. Again, I'm probably on a slightly extreme end of the spectrum because I'm just focused on like, wow, I went through all this analysis on my portfolio and what's done well and the nature of those relationships and where they've come from. And I'm like, most of the companies I've invested in that are great are founded by people that I already knew for years. Like, yes, I keep meeting with companies, like, don't get me wrong, but like, I got to fill up my calendar. I met another friend. His philosophy is like, I want to meet 60 new companies a week. It's like 12 a day, right? And I'm like, okay, to each their own. Like, that's what you want to do. You're going to find a diamond in the rough. Like, I feel very lucky. This is the reason I decided to start a fund that like, I don't need to find a diamond in the rough. I have a jewel box. I could just reach into it. Like I have these amazing relationships with people. I took a statistic on my second fund, which has 30 companies in it. The average length of relationship prior to investing, and again, I'm investing at pre-seed and seed. This is like inception, basically, stage. The average length of relationship across 30 companies prior to my investment was 3 years. Which means I knew the vast majority of these people long before they even decided to start this company. And then someone did the math and they were like, that's 90 years of relationships. Like, well, when you put it like that, that's ridiculous. And that's just 3 years worth of investments. That's 10 investments a year for 3 years. I'm a student of Cal Newport and I've been reading his book, Slow Productivity, and listening to his podcast. And it's like, do the things that matter. Take the time to figure out the things that matter and then do the things that matter and do an accounting of those things. And it turns out you can just be a lot more efficient. I also will give credit to my wife, who is like a superhero and doesn't like, she's like, she doesn't rely on me. Let's just put it that way. She doesn't rely on me to do a lot of different things, which is amazing. And I'm very grateful for it. Not everyone has a situation like that. I just had another flashback to being at someone's Shabbos table. And this woman had like 3 or 4 little kids. And she was like, I'm so busy. I can't even like daven a Shemona Esrei during the day. And my friend who we call this a low DOS move, but he was like, if you don't have like 15 minutes a day, like you need to reevaluate, right? Now you don't say that to a mom of 4 little kids. Like that's just like low DOS move, but there's some truth to that, right? Like,
careers that are exciting and are growing, and if you're not prepared for it, or if you don't have tools to deal with it, it does start to feel like, okay, like all my time's getting eaten up, all my effort, all my willpower, all my attention, it's all gone.
A lot of it's getting sucked away. Like our society is designed in a way to suck things away. If you listen to Cal Newport, his other big thing is like digital detox.
Right.
And like, if you really did an actual like cheshbon and how much time, let's say this woman was spending on social media, right, I bet you could find, and again, people are like, oh, I just need to decompress. And I'm like, that's a mistake. Social media is not decompressing. It's actually riling you up and doing all these crazy things with your hormones to keep you sucked in. Like, so I think, and this is, by the way, a piece of advice I give to all my founders as well. Like the hardest part about being a founder of a startup is that you're responsible for everything. That's like a nitty gritty bug in the code, a complaint from a customer, an employee who's sick. Oh, and then like, what's my 100,000-foot vision that I have to sell to investors and capitalize the business? Like, and then, I have to review the finances. Like, it's a tremendous breadth of things that you have to do. And there's a tendency to just want to ignore things. And there's also a tendency to just I just got to focus and do. I'm like, spend 1 hour a week. Like a week has 168 hours. Like you could take 1 hour a week. And by the way, I guarantee you, I say 1 hour, but you could probably do it in like 15 minutes. And just think like, okay, let me go back through my schedule this week. And by the way, the AI tools will do this for you. You just have to ask. Like, let me go back through my week and figure out where did I spend time and was it valuable? Was it accretive towards my goals? And so going back to Rav Yochanan and Ilfa, right? When Ilfa went out and did this stuff, he clearly continued learning while he was on these ships, right? Even if it was in his head. And it was enough. And he got the Siyata Shmaya and the divine providence to like maintain that knowledge because he was doing things for the right reason. He was doing it lishma, and he spent that time appropriately, and it was focused, right? And Rav Yochanan was doing the same thing. Maybe Rav Yochanan's version of that was a little bit more visible and linear and obvious. But I think that we're all guilty of mistaking productivity for what really matters, and it's something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about. I've been writing about it as well because I think it's important, and we all need to, do a little bit more introspection and spiritual accounting and just time accounting of like how we're spending time taking that. Sometimes it's just 5 seconds to just be like, okay, that experience I just had, that meeting I just had, that chavrusa I just had, whatever it is, does that energize me? Do I feel better after that? Or do I feel worse after that? And then putting the structures in place in your life to be successful and again, fulfill your tafkid and be the best version of yourself. Because I think that's what deep down, that's what everyone wants to figure out and then go do.
It's an amazing way to wrap this up because that's really, there's a lot more to the story and there's so many different other angles, but I think that's really the main takeaway, that they both had an extraordinarily successful life. They both lived out their values. They did it in different ways. And yes, we don't get that background information, but Rabbi Yochanan's daily schedule and his work habits or his discipline to become a successful leader of a yeshiva was probably looks very different than than Ilfa's schedule of how am I going to study Torah on a boat? How am I going to maintain my Jewish values when I'm, in a different port and there's a totally different culture and there's all these challenges? So they for sure had totally different structures and disciplines and habits, and it would have looked completely different. But we see at the end of the story, they both achieved this amazing success. They both didn't, betray their values, and they both accomplished that by knowing very well what are my values and understanding, okay, so now that I know what my values are, what are the strategies that I'm going to use to live by that and to bring that in?
I'll end with just like a quote from Rabbi Orlowek, Rav Noach Orlowek, which is, you have to first establish your values, then your goals, then your priorities, then your schedule. And those things need to be aligned. And what I was talking about just now is more like your priorities and your schedule. Like, does that even work? Right. So you have to start the conversation with what are my values and what are my goals and what are my priorities and my schedule. But then when you do an analysis, you start with, how did I spend my time? And then you work your way back to your values. And again, these are scary conversations to have by yourself, scary journaling, writing exercises to do, hard conversations to have with people. It could be like embarrassing. You don't want to waste people's time. You come up with all these excuses. Why not? Truthfully, you can use AI for a lot of this. You can be like, help me flesh out my goals, Claude.
It wouldn't be a real podcast if you didn't mention AI.
I think that I just wrote about this too, that like people are still learning how to use AI and use their imagination for what it can be used for. I thought of an agent yesterday. We can cut this out. We can finish, but
okay.
I'll just tell you this because you'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
I ran into a friend walking down the street yesterday. He was holding some flowers, right? And he's a single guy. So he's like, yeah, I have a date tonight. It's like my 6th date with this girl. Haven't seen her in like a week. I'm excited to go out with her. I was like, great. I was like, do you have like a corner man? Right. I was very big when I was dating on having a corner man. And that corner man was some combination of Aaron Bedrick, who was my roommate, who's a tzaddik, and Rabbi Stein, who's like my rabbi.
Amazing
who's
rabbi.
Also a tzaddik.
Yeah.
And I would go to them and they would ask me questions and be like, well, last time you talked about this and did you clarify that? And I was talking to my friend yesterday, just walking down the street. I was like, you can do that with AI. At the end of every date, just open up a voice note, talk through it, be like, we talked about this, we talked about that. Just, you don't have to like do any like deep calculations and analysis, just like flow, just talk it out. Like, be that crazy person walking down the street, talking into your phone, whatever. Actually, it's not, that's just like normal in Israel. But, and then dump that into just a single chat with any AI. They all can do this, right? And just be like, transcribe that and like take note. That was after date 1 on this date, right?
No,
and then do it after the next
date.
date. To be like, okay, am I doing a good job of like sussing out what I need to suss out on these dates? Like, what was I worried about before? And what are some ideas of things I could do or ask on the date or places we could go that would help me better understand this about this person? Like, that's the
It's extremely well suited to shidduchim, like, orthodox, dating, which is more, we would call it tachlis oriented, like where the dating is from the beginning, there's this idea that, okay, we're going to get to know each other. But yeah, there's a goal of like, let's see if there could be a serious relationship here. There's more of an emphasis on like information gathering and tracking the trajectory of it. Whereas another dating type of scenario, people could just, let it fly. Maybe if AI had been around, it wouldn't have taken me till 31 to get married, and I wouldn't have to.
But I will say that like the mistake people can make, because I feel like I'd have to call it out, is that like people think, oh, I'm going to put 2 shidduch resumes into an AI and be like, or put 20 in, I don't know, and be like, all right, give me a good match. It's like, you still have to leave space for the chemistry, for the intangibles, for all of those things. But figuring out where to draw those lines, I think that's probably the main goal of our generation.
Right, not just for shidduchim, for everything. Thank you so much, Alex. This was I appreciate all the time you gave us, and this was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.